Welcome to a ride on the outside. MMA is full of people on the inside, but what about the ones that watch from beyond? Welcome to the MMA Outsiders with Tom Albano and Zan Bando on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
Welcome back. This is episode 101 of the MMA Outsiders. Looks a little different this week. Pat, Danna in for Tom Albano, but it's still going to be this great content. Pat, before we get into the nitty-gritty of everything and all of the run-throughs we have to do, how are you doing on this fine Tuesday night at the time that this is going to drop?
I'm doing pretty good, getting ready for Dana White's Contender Series, my daily uploads on YouTube for my breakdowns for those, and I've just been kind of grinding those out, watching tape, and making sure I get those breakdowns out in time.
For sure, and those have definitely been very helpful as we only have a few weeks left to Dana White's Contender Series. For those of you who don't know, you can catch the Dana White Contender Series every Tuesday night through the middle of the those begin at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific on ESPN Plus and on UFC Fight Pass all over the world. It's a nice little plug for DWCS there. Before we get into anything else, though, just wanted to remind you all to please be sure to like and subscribe to the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. This is very important as we are inching closer and closer to 1,000 subscribers. So if you like the content you hear in tonight's episode, it would be very much appreciated if you went on, gave it a like, gave it a share, and then, of course, subscribe to the network. That way it helps out the algorithm. For those of you who don't know by now, my name is Zain Bando. You may know me from Bando's Breakdowns, of course, as well as this show. You can catch all of my MMA content over at MMA Knockout, as I'm a writer there that's under the Sports Illustrated family, if you will. And to my right is Pat Danna, who is a journalist for Combat Sports UK. Pat, do you kind of want to tell the audience briefly about what you do over there and kind of what your duties are?
Yeah, no, I kind of just, write, manage, edit, kind of do everything that would be required of the site, just at different times.
For sure. Obviously, as you know from watching and listening to the show every week, it's always going to be a jack of all trades show, and we will have to get into. But before we get into anything else related to the show's content, if you will, we just wanted to remind you all that the MMA Outsiders is presented by Playback. So without further ado, here we go. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience, from playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together, and with the NBA season right around the corner, you can join our community right now by going to playback.tv/ETV network to find out more, including our live stream schedule, which is going to be full of tons of content over the next several months as we get closer and closer to the new year. But that's obviously very exciting, but that's all content for another day. We're here to talk about some fights. It's the second, as you could say, second full week into the month of October. We had UFC 307 this past weekend, and a lot happened. So I guess let's start with the main event. We had Alex Pereira defending his UFC light heavyweight title against Khalil Rountree. Down on the scorecards going into round 4, but is able to secure the TKO. It's his third light heavyweight title defense in a 7-month period. Pat, I guess we can start with this. What did you think of the fight, and what did you think of Pereira's performance overall? Because I thought he looked great.
I mean, incredible fight. I think, in my opinion, it was one of the better fights of the year. It was back and forth action, a lot of striking on the feet, and just a lot of big punches being thrown from both guys. It just had a lot of what people would like to see, and I love to watch it myself. I thought that Rountree definitely could give Pereira problems early with his striking, but he actually did better than what I would have expected and gave him more trouble than I would have thought. He was clearly up 2-0 going into that third round, but then you saw his gas tank started to wear a bit. That pressure from Pereira started to get to him, and Pereira really started to tee off in that third round, and then the fourth round was just an absolute obliteration. I mean, that was that was like Conor-esque, especially that finishing sequence of him just dodging everything that Rountree threw and then landing everything he threw in return before finishing the fight. I mean, that was just an incredible performance from Alex Pereira, and I can't wait to see him fight again. I mean, he is just one of those champions that every time he fights, you know you're going to get something special.
Yeah, there's definitely an aura about him for sure. And it seems that the general consensus, just within the MMA community, is with Alex Pereira single-handedly carrying the UFC, and to a certain extent, I would agree with that.
I would have to as well.
You just had Sean O'Malley lose his title to Marab last month. You had Dricus du Plessis, hang on to the middleweight title by beating Israel Adesanya. And if you just look down the list of champions at the moment, primarily most of them being, non-American champions, Alex Pereira being one of them, to me, and I think this is a general consensus amongst everyone that I think he's the most exciting fighter in the sport. And to be frank with you, and this is no disrespect to the co-main event, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, but I seriously don't think that if Alex Pereira was not the headliner for this event, that anybody would be giving the event the showers that it deserves. Because to me, from what he's shown over the last year and the meteoric rise that he's had, like I just alluded to a minute ago, 3 title defenses in a 7-month period, having to win the vacant light heavyweight title last fall after moving up from being the former middleweight champion. To me, I just think I think he's must see TV no matter who he fights. And you could say, oh, Khalil Rountree didn't deserve the shot, and you could say, that he beat the same fighter twice, within those 3 defenses. But I would push back on those people and say, I mean, in Pat, if you looked at the current landscape of the light heavyweight division at the time that he fought, Yuri Prohaska in the 2 fights that he did, he was the only, in my opinion, noteworthy contender that Pereira could have fought. So I think that's a little bit unfair to a certain extent. And number 2, just think or imagine, what if Khalil Rountree didn't take this fight? What if Alex Pereira decided, no, I want to fight somebody else? He would have been painted for a little bit more in a negative light. So for the people that I've seen, the retractors, if you will, that are discounting the work that he's done, try to name any other fighter in the sport right now that could have been tasked to do what Alex Pereira did. I don't think you can name a single person who would have been able to do what exactly Alex Pereira did, because you rarely, if ever, see this in the sport, regardless of promotion. And I think that there's something to be said for that, to stay that active and to remain and to remain the champion in the dominant fashion that he's doing it in, and to finish people. That's another thing. You see a lot of these champions that have these extended title runs where, they'll have a couple of exciting finishes and then they'll go on a decision spree, or George St. Pierre being a prime example of it. And this is no disrespect to him. He's one of the greatest fighters of all time, arguably top 3 all time. But at least in my years of watching MMA, I've never seen a champion be this dominant in a short amount of time than Pereira has been. And I think it's just a testament of him, doing what he needs to do to prove himself as one of the best fighters in the world. Because before he entered into the division, the light heavyweight division was in a lull that I think a lot of people were worried wasn't going to end well. And thankfully, there's been sort of a resurgence, which is good to see. What do you think?
I think there was other noteworthy contenders to take on. I mean, I think Magomed Ankalaev comes to mind. He should have fought Magomed Ankalaev in this fight.
No, I don't disagree. My overall point is, though, was could you imagine if for whatever reason Pereira said, I won't fight him, but I'll fight somebody else. That was more so my point. In regards to, had he chosen not to fight Khalil when the UFC asked him to.
I don't really know, though. I mean, maybe it would have painted him negatively in the UFC's light, but I don't know if we would have ever really known about it. I don't know if we would have ever known that he declined to fight against Rountree. And I don't know if a lot of people would have faulted him for it, because a lot of people didn't think Rountree deserved a title shot. Even though he kind of just proved he could hang in there with Pereira and he deserved to be in there, a lot of people beforehand didn't think he deserved it. So I don't think he really would have gotten that much flack for not taking a fight with Roundtree if that's what was being offered.
For sure, and to just kind of piggyback off on that to another small aspect of this, I'm obviously you've followed MMA for quite some time now. Have you ever seen a champion in this short amount of time be as dominant as he has? Because it's hard for me to think of any examples that have remotely come close to something like this, regardless of who he's beat.
He's definitely one of the most dominant for sure. I would say Khabib was more dominant.
Okay,
Khabib is definitely right up there with him. I think
okay,
those two are probably the first two that come to mind in my opinion. Kamaru Usman was a really dominant champion. Izzy was, but he had just a lot of fights that he just wasn't inactive in, I guess you could say. But Usman and Khabib, I'd say, are the two closest you can compare Pereira to in terms of just sheer dominance at the weight class. Maybe Volkanovski as well. He's another one I'm probably forgetting about. But there's a couple that I feel like Pereira is right up there with as one of the most dominant champions since I started watching the sport back in 2018.
for sure. And I mean, he to me is the most dominant light heavyweight champion since John Jones in his extended reign. Um,
Yes.
he's doing things that I think a younger version of Jones would have been able to do if they would have swapped positions. Which actually leads me to my next point. I'll give my opinion on this, and then I'll let you have the floor on it. But he made it very clear in a ESPN MMA post fight interview with Megan O'Leary alongside his coach that he would like to take some well deserved time off, and I don't fault him for that. I as my overall thought is he says he wants to stay at light heavyweight for the moment, which I don't disagree. But at the same time, he didn't seem as open as I would have suspected him to be to attempt to go back to 185 to try to win the middleweight title again. That was a little bit surprising, just considering how ambitious he's been to try to stay as active as possible. I'm not sure if you saw this interview, but I thought it was a very fascinating portion of the interview that made me think, oh, he might be sticking around 205 longer than we would have expected. What do you think?
I mean, honestly, I don't see why he would move back down to 185. Obviously, the double champ status and everything, but at this point, it's a 20-pound extra weight cut. Yeah, he was able to do it before, but look where it got him. It got him chinned by Israel Adesanya, a guy that he kind of proved that he could beat. So I just think that at 205, Pereira looks like a lot better of a fighter. And cutting 20 pounds is not easy. Especially when you're used to only cutting. I think he weighs around 230. So he's been
Yeah,
cutting about 25
his
pounds.
walk around weight on fight night was 230 pounds.
Yeah, so he's only been cutting about 25 pounds compared to if he goes back down 45, it's just going to be so much for him. Like, I get it, the double champ status would be crazy, but he already won belts in both weight classes. Even if it wasn't at the same time, it was still a really
Right.
incredible feat what he accomplished. I don't
He's
think
only he's
I don't
only
think
one
it'll
of
be worth it enough for his body.
right, and he's only one of 9 champions to ever do that,
Ex-
to win 2 titles in 2 different divisions, no matter at what time period, which is unbelievable. And
Exactly.
I'm not going to name all 9, but at least 7 of them off the top of my head are either future or current UFC Hall of Famers. So he's in a rare piece of company.
In
So
my opinion, at this point, Pereira is more likely to move up to heavyweight than he is to drop back down to middleweight.
which that's actually a perfect segue because I'm one of those people that would love to see him move to heavyweight at some point, but I'm also one of those people who says I think his window to move to heavyweight is whenever he wants because this is my theory. I've talked about it. I've talked about it on the show plenty of times, and I've gone back and forth. But I'm gonna stand firm on it now. About a month out from it, I I had to apologize to my fellow co-host Tom a couple weeks ago. I caved in and I eventually agreed with him that that I think whoever wins the Jones Stipe fight is going to retire. So I think the Alex Pereira Tom Aspinall potential window is going to be within the next year and a half, and I actually think that it's a fight that's more likely to happen than not. What do you think?
I think it's a bit more likely now for sure after this win. I mean, I think if Pereira beats Ankalaev, he's really cleared out the division to the point where we could very well see that fight in the future.
For sure. And not to mention the fact that even if he somehow loses to Ankalaev, the UFC has the biggest light heavyweight rematch that they could sell, probably since Jones versus wasn't a rematch per se, but probably the biggest rivalry light heavyweight title fight they could sell since Jones versus Evans all the way back in 2012. So, I mean, if that doesn't show you the current status of where light heavyweight is and how much better it's gotten, I don't know what will. I just going to say one last thing before we segue into the co-main event. I grew up in the prime era of Chuck Liddell when he was on his light heavyweight title reign, and Alex Pereira, the way he's knocking people out is very early similar to when Chuck Liddell would fight, where you just knew, okay, if the fight is over, if the fight gets past the first round, that means the fight was probably boring, and if the fight ends in the first, second, or third round, by nasty finish, there's a good chance it's similar to things can happen. The way he knocks people out reminds me a lot of Chuck Liddell's prime years when he was able to knock everybody out as the once very dominant light heavyweight champion. But let's move on now to the co-main event. Had a lot of bad blood here. Former Ultimate Fighter roommates. We had Raquel Pennington, who came in as the champion, won the vacant title from Mayra Bueno Silva back in January. She was taking on Julianna Pena, who was coming off of a over 2-year absence. She had broken her ribs, which is why in June of 2023 she was unable to fight Amanda Nunes. Of course, Amanda Nunes beat Irene Aldana. That was at UFC 289. Then, of course, Amanda Nunes retired, which set up the vacant title fight, and of course, Pena and Pennington came back. This was a very, I guess you could say, competitive fight. It was definitely a close fight. It was not the best women's fight I've ever seen, nor it was the worst women's fight I've ever seen. It just had that kind of it had that stinky feeling where until the fourth round, at least for me, I felt like I was going to be half asleep because not a whole lot really happened until round 4. What did you think of this fight overall? And can you just kind of talk to me about the fight before we get into the controversy that was the decision? Because as you guys have probably seen, it's gone viral all over Twitter now. But the very famous site MMA Decisions, which is where media members can put in their scorecards, not a single media member that I saw, minus one who had it a draw. Well, I'm not going to say who it is. This media member scorecards are usually all over the place, but outside of his scorecard, not a single person scored the fight for the eventual new champion, Julianna Pena. So with all that being said, what did you think of the fight?
I thought you said it pretty well. It was a pretty, I guess, stinky, you could call it, fight. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, it wasn't great. I mean, listen, the first round, close, competitive, whatever. 2 and 3 were clear clear Pennington rounds. And
I agree with
and
that.
then 4 and 5 were clear. Not 4 and 5. Sorry. I have my rounds mixed up. 2 and 3 were clear Juliana rounds, and then 4 and 5 were clear Pennington rounds. Sorry.
So it all comes down to how you score round 1.
Yes, and that's the thing. It was a close first round, I thought. So in terms of the scorecards, I did think Pennington won, but I did think it was close. I could see how you scored for Juliana. Like you said, it was just a boring fight outside of that fourth round. I mean, Pennington kind of put it on her in that fourth round, but it didn't really excite me too much, honestly. I mean, I thought the fight was all right. Was I checking my phone halfway through it and probably just sitting there scrolling for a minute or two? Yeah, because it was just there just wasn't a lot happening, honestly. I mean, I tried to get into it and I just really couldn't. Really, I honestly, but what can you say? Julianna Pena is the new champ.
Yeah. To me, I mean, I just couldn't believe. I mean, I'm sure I'm sorry, I'm sure you had a similar reaction. I just could not believe for the life of me that in round 4, when Raquel Pennington nearly finished Julianna Pena, that Pena didn't go out. I think many other fighters would have gotten dropped by that shot and been very susceptible to more damage, but she was able to survive, and more power to her. And that was the one chance, in my opinion, that Pennington had, because Pennington's offense to me was just next to non-existent. And I thought she was going to use her wrestling a lot more, and she just simply couldn't do it.
Yeah. And it stinks because, like, I hate to say it, but you have like a bunch of women's fights sometimes that are kind of going to be like decisions that look like that, right? And then you ask yourself, you know what though? What would happen if that fight was 5 rounds? And that was one of those fights that was 5 rounds. And it was just 5 rounds of that. You know what I mean? It's not like anything interesting happens in those fourth or fifth rounds. I mean, the knockdown was cool, but it really didn't turn out to be anything, you know? So it just goes to show, like, women's 135 isn't in the best place right now. Maybe Kayla Harrison can change it. Maybe a Nunes comes back, but it's clear that that weight class needs severe help for sure.
Yeah. Severe help in the worst way, very well said. Just wanted to quickly comment on what you just said about Amanda Nunes. I understand it's 1-1. I understand as in pure mathematical sense. It's just literally looking at the numbers straight up that the trilogy makes numerical sense. I get it because it's 1-1. But if you look at the sheer domination that Nunes put on her in fight 2, I don't think it warrants the third fight. What I think was a real stinker in this whole thing was the UFC was smart. They had a prime setup to where it was a side by side screen and Kayla Harrison was on the other side. You had the moment to make the call out to start the whole promo production, and you blew it. I don't understand. Kayla Harrison is the biggest signee in UFC Women's 135 history, arguably since Chris Cyborg, and he's literally in the back after a very dominant performance against the game Ketlin Vieira, who, by the way, was a massive underdog and was able to go the distance with Harrison. Uh, Props to her. But you literally had the grand moment to sell the biggest fight since Amanda Nunes was champion, and you blew it. I don't understand. What did you think of her strategy by not calling out Harrison and instead calling out the consensus women's GOAT? What do you think?
I mean, I think they'll have enough time to promote the fight with Julianna Pena. We know how Julianna Pena is. She talks a lot. I think they'll have the time to do their promos and get their beef and just talk their shit, basically. I think they'll have their time. I don't think it'll be too big of an issue, but I do think it is a little weird that Pena took that route of calling out Nunes and kind of just completely disregarded Harrison. It was pretty obvious what the UFC was trying to do, putting those fights on the same card together. And for her to take the I want Amanda to come back route instead of give me Kayla Harrison and let me derail this hype train, I thought it was kind of stupid, honestly. Like, Juliana really should have taken advantage of that and taken the Harrison call out.
100%. And I just wanted to get your quick thoughts on Julianna Pena, quote, not being impressed with Kayla Harrison's performance on Saturday. I think her answer was a bit cop-outy, in my opinion. I wrote a story about it for SI, and even I was listening to that interview going, what in the world is he talking about? She literally dominated Ketlin Vieira in every single possible way you could dominate her, including nearly finish her on 3 separate occasions. I don't know what in particular would not be impressive about it. I don't know if this is new news to you or not, but what did you think of the way Pena responded to how Kayla Harrison's performance was? And I actually am already on the theory, even as someone who has a little bit of Chicago hometown bias, I'm already on the theory that I think that Julianna Pena is overlooking Kayla Harrison, and when they actually do fight, it's going to come back to bite her. That's what
I think no matter how Kayla's performance was, Juliana was going to say that she wasn't impressed. I mean, I don't think Juliana's actually underestimating her. I think she's more just making it seem like she is and trying to make it seem like Harrison isn't a big deal. I really don't think anything of what she says, like in terms of that, is true. I think she is taking Harrison as a serious threat. I think she knows Harrison's really good, and that's just her way of hyping up the fight.
For sure. So, as you know, Tom and I like to play armchair matchmaker. Speaking of that, Dana did announce that there were a couple of potential new locations in the works, with Chicago and Seattle being two of them. Um, when do you think would be an ideal time frame for the Kaylee Hurst and Julianna Pena fight? And do you think it's do you think it's worthy of being a co-main event on a major card with multiple title fights attached to it?
Yeah, I think it'd be pretty worthy to be a co-main event with Kayla and Juliana. They'd probably hype it up and promote it well, so I think it'd be worthy of a co-main event spot. In terms of what timing, whenever either of them are ready. I don't know if either of them have injuries. I know Kayla was saying that there was something going on. She had to go to the hospital a week before the fight. I'm not really sure what's up with that, if that issue got resolved or not fully. So it's really just whenever the girls are healthy and should. Maybe March sounds good, something like that, you know? So I'd say around that time.
Yeah, March makes logical sense considering that the UFC does a major pay per view in Las Vegas, usually that first weekend. So if you top the card with a fight that people are waiting to see, whether it's a heavyweight championship fight, whether it finally is Pereira versus Ankalaev, or a different title fight, I think that's definitely noteworthy to take in as well. Before we move away from UFC 307 for a little bit and we get into some news and notes, Pat, I just wanted to wish you congratulations. You went 10-2 on predictions this past weekend. I went 6-6. Tom went 8-4. Um, is it gonna be a magical month for you? It's just is this just luck of the draw, or have you just simply been a beast at picking fights this year? Because your record is very stellar, my friend. It's very good.
I don't know, man. I guess we'll find out if it's a good month for me or not this weekend. I really don't know. I hope it's a good month, but I think it's just, I had a good card. That's probably it.
For sure. And by the way, I saw a bunch of people that had very similar records as you. So I think a lot of people were on a similar wavelength as you. And I've gotten a chance to have 10 plus win cards before. And it's definitely a great feeling knowing that you feel like you're an expert for that one night. And you have to reset, go to a new card, and be really worried like, oh, am I going to get this one right, or am I going to get it wrong? So
Yeah.
that's that's good for you to definitely see. And given how much I've struggled in picking main events correctly and stuff, me getting the co-main and main event right and finishing 3-2 on the main card, I'll take it. But overall, I thought it was we usually end up grading these UFC events too before we move on. So I guess I guess on a scale from 1 to 10, A plus to D minus or whatever, what would you rank UFC 307 before we move on?
Hmm. It's a good question. 6 out of 10? 7
Okay.
out of 10?
Okay, I would give it a 7 out of 10. I'd give it between the C plus and B minus range. And what what tipped me over to the B minus range was the way that excuse me was the way that Pereira won. I don't think if he had won in that fashion or it had Roundtree somehow pulled off the upset, that's what put me over to the B minus side. But if neither of those things happened and the main event was a dud or it just didn't live up to expectations, it would have given it a flat C for me. But given kind of the wild craziness of the main card and what happened from Kevin Owens' broken rib to the way the final prelim ended between Wonderboy Thompson and Joaquin Buckley and a couple other fights on the card, I think B minus is a fair grade, but I could definitely see a C as well. I don't think we're going to be hitting grades on the next few UFCs because at least we know the next two UFCs are really good. So hopefully those will be in the B plus A minus range. That's the whole goal. But I would say UFC 307 from a respectable grade standpoint would be in the B minus C category. So I'm glad we agree on that. So
Yeah.
now we're going to move on to some news and notes, starting out with a crazy boxing UFC crossover. And it involves Terence Crawford. So apparently, Terence Crawford said in an interview with one of the crossover fight podcasts. I can't remember which one it was, but Terence Crawford said he turned down a pair of fights with former UFC double champion Conor McGregor. Given Terence Crawford's popularity in boxing, I'll go first on this. I think Terence Crawford is very smart to turn these fights down for a couple of reasons. Number one, he's one of the best fighters in the world at his weight division at 147. He just had a masterful performance against Earl Spence about a year or so ago. He just dominated Madrimov in California in August in a fight that, or as you know, it wasn't dominant. It was a very close fight, but he looked good in it. And it just seems like he's really kind of taken the American boxing scene by storm, given that he's from Nebraska and there's not a lot of prominent boxing champions who are from the United States. You think of Tyson Fury from the UK, you think of Alexander Usyk from Ukraine, you think of the guys that we're going to preview in this weekend's main event. Beterbiev not being from the United States, et cetera, et cetera. I think Terence Crawford is one of the few guys who can actually lay claim to that. And even though Conor McGregor is a big deal money-wise, I think he's more worried about running the risk of getting seriously injured than, actually really fully focusing on his current career at hand, which is being one of the best boxers on the planet. What did you think of him turning down an offer to box and fight Conor McGregor in a 2-fight series as part of Riyadh season? And do you think he made the right decision in doing so? What do you think?
Well, I think it would have been absolutely sick. I think it would have been so fun if it actually happened, like Crawford versus McGregor in MMA and boxing. That would have been so cool. Come on, we've never really had anything like that. I know we've had, Conor Mayweather and everything, but we didn't have it in MMA too. That would have been a sick 2-fight deal. So, one, as just simply a fan, it sucks. It really does, because this would have been so cool as a fan. But I completely understand why Crawford didn't do it. I completely understand why he didn't want to fight in MMA, why he wouldn't want to just risk any of it. He's probably made so much money already. He's still in the middle of his prime. It's not like it's a Mayweather situation with McGregor where he's past his prime and this is just a cash grab and a fun thing to do after his career. He's still right smack in the middle of his prime, and he'd be wasting good years of his prime where he could be adding to his legacy just doing a money fight like this. This is something that I think would still be there in 5 years after his prime is gone. This is something that could still be a possibility. So hopefully, there's a chance that we do eventually see this, but I highly doubt it for sure. I just think it would be really cool if it would have gotten done.
Oh, I could totally understand where you're coming from too. And by the way, speaking of money, Terence Crawford's current estimated net worth as of August of this year is $18 million. So the man is getting paid to win and to win decisively and to win in a lot. So I totally understand. Yeah, he's probably made more money than the figure that I just read. Would that have been super cool? Yeah. The big question would have been is, okay, it would have been 2 totally different fights. By the way, I wish I could say it on here, but I can't. I just got some breaking news that I need to keep private. That'll tell you after. But it's
Okay.
it's surrounding let's just say it's surrounding a fight in a certain division that people have been waiting to see for a while. That's been on 4 times and off 4 times, and it's a running game. Let me continue on with this though. At this point in Conor McGregor's career, it's like he needs to figure out what he actually wants to do, because he's been keeping everybody sitting around for 3 years. Is he going to come back? Is he going to fight Chandler? Is he going to fight this guy? Is he going to fight that guy? No one knows except for him what he's going to do. The UFC's been very reluctant to say what he's going to do. The tune has changed. First, after the fight was canceled in June, it was going to be, we'll move the fight to December. And a few weeks later, it's 2025. And then a few weeks later, when asked about it again, they just simply don't answer. So I've always said it from I don't know, the mid 80s episodes or something. there's some sort of NDA that nobody knows about, that nobody will ever know about, as to why Conor McGregor is not fully back competing in combat sports. And I don't know if we'll ever know until a documentary 20 years later comes out that reveals the real truth as to why this holdup is becoming a real thing. And I'm sure you could probably agree with that to a certain extent.
Yeah, probably.
So, with that being said, we're gonna move on to some more boxing news. My favorite boxer on the planet, Gervonta Davis, is back. He's fighting Lamont Roach December 14th, WBA championship on the line. Two Maryland guys all of a sudden fighting in Texas of places. How do you have two dudes from the same city and now put them in the same city for a hometown fight? That's the first red flag that didn't make sense to me. And I guess follow-up question to that would be, do you think this is going to be a walk in the park for Tank Davis, or do you think Lamont Roach has things that Tank Davis has never seen before, that people should look out for? Because I did some research on Lamont Roach. To me, the only way Lamont Roach can win this fight is if he does it within the first 3 rounds, or somehow Tank is compromised going into the fight that nobody knows about. Because to me, this should be an easy win for the WBA champion to move on to bigger and better fights.
I actually think Lamont Roach is pretty good. I've known his name for a bit back when he fought Jamel Herring, and
That's
he's been on
right.
a streak. He's been on a streak since then. He's been doing good, but he just hasn't fought like the same competition as Davis has been fighting. He's fought guys with good records, but not actual good guys. You know how that is in boxing.
No,
So
I do. I know exactly. I know exactly what you're talking about.
yeah, so I as much as I think Lamont Roach might test Tank Davis a little bit and present some issues for him, I think this is going to be just another Tank Davis fight where he ends up walking through the dude at some point.
For sure. And do you think it'll be very similar to Tank Davis's last fight a couple months ago, where he had little to no trouble with his opponent?
Yeah,
And
I could very well see it being similar to that Frank Martin fight for sure.
okay. And do you think this is good for the PBC that they're putting a pay-per-view up against the final UFC Fight Night card of the year, or is this simply bad business because they might get outdrawn? What do you think?
I mm, it might not be the best business, but I think they'll be all right. I don't know if it'll kill them, but I think it could. They could have done better.
For sure, and I think it's going to come down to who's even on the undercard, because if the
It's true.
undercard's not good, then you really only have one fight to sell. So there's also that to think about too. And what's nice is they're not going up against UFC 310, which is the week before in Las Vegas, which at the time that we're recording this still doesn't have a main event. So for PBC to slide in, not take the date, if you will, similarly to the Sphere scenario, but to have something competing against it, against the final UFC Fight Night card of the year on the same night, I think is a decent business decision for PBC. The big question is going to be if they promote this fight the way that they promoted some of Tank Davis's other fights in the past, I think it'll get interest. I think people will be interested given the fact that it's Tank Davis and not necessarily the fact that he's fighting someone in Lamont Roach, who I can guarantee you most of the casual boxing fans outside of you, me, and a couple other people have ever heard of. So
Yes,
I know and you know that it's going to be a good fight, but the casual audience probably doesn't think so, and that's why you're going to have to tune in to find out, because crazier things in boxing have happened. So you never know.
for sure.
So all right. So now moving on to some more news and notes. We got some sad news on the Bellator front. Unfortunately, the Bellator event in Paris, which is headlined by Leandro Hugo and Patchy Mix, has unfortunately been canceled. Pat, what was your initial reaction to this very disappointing news, as another Bellator Champion Series card is now off the books? Unfortunately, what did you think?
Well, it just sucks. It really does. And we keep finding out about this before the promotion even announces it. The promotion isn't even releasing statements, and we're finding out these events are canceled. It's not right. The promotion needs to give more transparency, give more clarity. I think it's really messed up that people have to find out through social media. And, well, I mean, they'd be finding out through social media anyways, but through other people on social media, not the promotion themselves. I think it's crazy that the promotion isn't the one announcing the news. And it's just upsetting to me because I feel bad for the fighters that were planning to fight on those cards.
Me
They
too.
had the Chicago card that also got canceled for October 12th, which was supposed to be in just 5 days. We were planning on covering that event together. So it's just a
Mhm.
big shame what's going on with Bellator right now, and they're just giving no transparency at all. They're just hiding everything behind the scenes, not telling us why these events are getting canceled, and just continuing to cancel them. It's very upsetting. And then, of course, One Championship now cancels their event in Atlanta and moves it over to Thailand. And now we just have this whole situation of Bellator cancels 2 events in 2 months, and now One Championship's canceling their US event. It's like, what is going on with all these MMA promotions not named the UFC right now? It's crazy. None of them can really do anything right, it seems.
Well, I'm going to put it simply, and this is no disrespect to any of the great people that work with us directly, over at Bellator and over at PFL and stuff. I just don't think anybody can compete with the UFC anymore. Like, I think it's just as simple as that. If you don't have the financials, and if you don't have 7 to 10 stars that you can always push to for every 4 to 5 shows that are supposed to be your big shows of the year, that's a problem. And then when you're putting all your eggs in one basket, this is no disrespect to them, but when you're putting all your eggs in one basket for a Battle of the Giants card that, let's be frank here, maybe only has 3 good fights out of however many there are on the card, that's a little bit of a problem. And when you're pushing, a guy in your biggest signee in Francis Ngannou, who hasn't fought in MMA in over 2.5 years, and it seems like there's no backup plan if he loses to Henning Ferrer. So it's like, if you're going to put all your eggs in one basket, the least that you can do is be transparent, like you just said, as to why all of these other events are being canceled. Because when this whole merger transaction, whatever the heck you want to call it, happened, they said that they guaranteed, the Bellator Champion Series to be 8 shows with a title fight attached to each one, and we simply haven't gotten that. It's and oh, we're gonna do it here or there. Oh, there's an injury to a fighter. Let's elevate the co-main event. The same thing happened with the Sarah Collins even in Dublin, Ireland. I'm like a week and a half notice, and nobody knew unless you looked at social media as to why as to the Fabian Edwards Johnny Eblen fight was eventually postponed and of course rebooked and whatever. But still, it's like, again, the least you can do, especially as two people who cover the promotion on a regular basis, and even just from a fan perspective, the least you could do is tell your general audience that follows your promotion what in the world is going on. Because I can tell you this, I'm not going to say who he is because I'd rather protect his privacy, but that I had people messaging me saying that they already had hotel rooms and flights booked to Chicago for this weekend show that they had to cancel them because there was no longer a show. So
And no word from promotion officials.
nope.
We had to hear it from
And
MMA. We had to hear it from MMA Fighting about the Chicago show, and this Paris show. Pretty sure got leaked by the actual arena, right? The arena announced that the event was canceled, and then
yeah,
and it was
yeah,
forced to make a statement. Then
the arena announced that the event was canceled, and then 15 minutes later was literally a 1 sentence PR statement saying that the event was canceled and that the fighters have been made aware, but there was no reason given as to why or how or what exactly happened. So,
yeah,
was
just
there
very
anything?
unfortunate overall.
I didn't mean to interrupt. Was there anything else you wanted to add to that?
Nope, just a very unfortunate situation overall. Sucks that it even has to be talked about.
Definitely a very unfortunate situation there on the Bellator front. Just hoping we can get our coveted New Year's Eve show. That way the year can have some sort of a completion to it. But now we're going to move on back over to the boxing side. Now in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, the undisputed light heavyweight championship is on the line as the winner of this fight between Artur Beterbiev versus Dmitry Bivol is going to be the first undisputed light heavyweight champion since Roy Jones Jr. achieved that feat all the way back in 1999. Pat, even though what we're going to talk about in a little bit is the fight that I'm going to this weekend in Las Vegas. This is obviously the biggest fight of the weekend in combat sports. What are your early thoughts on this? And do you think that Dmitry-Bivol could potentially move one step closer to finally getting his coveted rematch with Canelo Alvarez, which is a fight that I think a lot of people want to see, considering how controversial the decision was a couple years ago?
Well, I think it's an awesome fight. First off, I just think this fight is incredible. Um, this fight's needed to happen for probably what, 3-4 years now, I'd
I
say.
would
This
say
has been a
so.
fight that's been brewing for so long. I mean, I remember when I first got into boxing, probably around 4 or 5 years ago. These guys were both just becoming champions, I'm pretty sure, or had just won the belts, and they were both guys who were dominant that had been talked about as fighting each other. And it's crazy that it's taken this long to happen after injuries and everything. I'm just happy these two are finally a week away, not even from fighting. I mean, it's incredible. This fight is the light heavyweight version of Fury versus Usyk. And I don't care what you tell me. That's what this is in boxing right now. This is the light heavyweight version of it. Yeah, it's not as big, but it's because it's light heavyweight and not a heavyweight fight. But I think skill wise, I think in terms of how good these guys are, it's the same kind of fight. It really is. And I think it's going to be so fun. I think I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Beterbiev can come back and deal with the injuries he's had, especially after all the years have passed, because I'm pretty sure he is the older guy here by a little bit. He is 39 here, and Bivol is going to be the younger guy coming in. So the age, the injuries, I'm really interested to see how that's going to affect Beterbiev. If this fight happened maybe 3 years ago, I would probably have picked Beterbiev. Even maybe 2 years ago, I probably would have picked him because I think that he's just such a beast. I really think his power is just crazy and that it always eventually gets to his opponents. But now, knowing what I know with the injuries and the age and everything, I just don't know if it'll be enough to take out such a dangerous guy like Dmitry-Bivol. So I think I'm going to lean Dmitry-Bivol here in this fight.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting fight. You were kind of talking about ages and whatnot. Tail of the tape, Artur Beterbiev. I can't speak. Artur Beterbiev coming in undefeated as is Dmitry-Bivol. Artur Beterbiev coming in at 20-0. According to Tapology, at the time that we're recording this, he is a plus 100 underdog. As you said, he's 39. He has the reach. He has the reach advantage by about a 1 inch. He's at 73 inches. Dmitry-Bivol's at 72. And yeah, I mean, this fight is going to be unbelievable. I mean, if you look at the Tapology numbers, they actually agree with you, Pat. 73% of the fans believe that Dmitry-Bivol is going to beat Artur Beterbiev, and I would happen to agree. For a couple of reasons. Number one, he's the younger fighter. Number two, I think he's fought the better competition. And number three, I just feel like his whole career he's been destined to be in a fight like this. This is very similar to Crawford Spence. The whole vibe around that fight was that Crawford was this young, up and coming savage from Nebraska who was destroying everybody. And what did he do when he fought Earl Spence? He beat him to a pulp. This is this is what I think could be a very similar circumstance here. I think it better be if doesn't get him out of there within the first 3 rounds. I think it's going to be a long, grueling, one-sided 12-round decision for Bivol, and I think it's going to be one of those fights that you will remember where you were when you saw it and stuff like that. I just think that given where Bivol is, given who he's fought in his career, given the run that he's been on, given that he's fully 100%, I think this is his fight to lose, and I think he also walks away undisputed champion. What are you outside of your prediction? What are you most looking forward to about the fight? Because I feel like the actual fight itself is getting so much hype. This is not a pay-per-view fight. It's exclusively on ESPN Plus. The way it was supposed to be done. So shout out to ESPN for making sure that everybody can see this. I just think it's one of those fights where in our generation, we've had a couple of major boxing fights. We've had Mayweather Pacquiao, Mayweather McGregor. now obviously Fury Usyk from a couple months ago. You could add this one to the list. I guess that could lead me to my next question too. Where does this fight rank major boxing fights that you've seen in your lifetime? Because it's definitely up there for me between the top 7 and the top 5 for sure.
Oh, I have no idea. It's going to be tough. I mean, it'll obviously depend on how the fight will play out too, but I'd have to say top 10 for sure, I think. Maybe even higher if I break it down, but just off the top of my head, definitely top 10.
Yeah, definitely top 10 for me too. So I guess we can come to a general consensus that we're both picking Bivol to win the championship on Saturday.
Yes, we are.
100%. So just a quick programming note on this fight, so you guys know, as I just alluded to, the card is taking place from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, is being promoted by several promoters, including Top Rank Boxing, Matchroom, Queensberry, World of Boxing, and Boxer with 2 X's, which is a promotion that I've never heard of, to be quite honest with you. The poster for this event is badass. Hopefully, I can buy it somewhere because that would be a nice add to the literal collection. We got some other interesting fights on this card. We got 33-3 Chris Eubank Jr. competing on this card. He's always exciting. We've got Ben Whitaker, who's one of the best young prospects at 175. You also have a couple other fights on this card. This is overall a very solid card, and I understand that people like to say, "Oh, Saudi sports washing" or whatever. Trust me, if it was not for Turkey Al Sheikh, this fight would have not gotten done when it did. So this man, you have to sing his praises again because he's making every fight that we've ever wanted to see. So
I agree, my friend. I agree.
You got to give him something, right?
Yes, for sure.
He is currently at the moment the Dana White professional boxing, whether you like it or not. So I think there's a reason why the UFC enjoys doing business with Saudi Arabia is because they can work with guys like that. It's that's why. Speaking of the UFC, we're going to go back to the United States. We're going to go now to UFC Vegas 98. We're going to preview it. We get the main event, huge flyweight contenders bout. Number 1 in Brandon Royval taking on the undefeated young up-and-coming stud from Japan, Tatsuro Taira. And I'm not going to reveal my special announcement just yet, but I guess I could confidently say that I'm extra excited for this fight. How about you?
I think it's a great fight. I love the prospect versus veteran kind of fights when we get to see if the prospect is really gonna pass that test. We kind of got that in Taira's last fight against Alex Perez, but it did end due to injury. You can argue the semantics about if he caused the injury, whatever, but it was an injury. It wasn't
Agreed.
A clean finish. You'd like to see a clean finish from a prospect like Taira over a top contender, and if he could do that against a guy like Royval, he shows he's really legit. If Royval can finally be the one to stop the hype train of Taira, that proves a lot to me, in my opinion, as well. I've just never been that high on Brandon Royval as a fighter overall. He usually proves me wrong, to be honest. He really does. And I just still to this moment am not as high on him as I probably should be. So I think I like Tatsuro Taira to win this fight, actually. I think he might lock up a submission here.
Yeah, I mean, Tatsuro Taira by submission, and you know this just as well as I do, that is a very popular betting prop this week, so I can understand why. And yeah, injury or not, the way he was able to beat Alex Perez and the way he was able to chop at the leg and just beat him in almost every aspect outside of the way the fight ended was very impressive. But I think experience is experience. I like Royval. He knows he's at a crossroads in his career. He knows he wants a shot at the title at some point. He's come up short on so many different occasions to where he was right there a couple of times and he just couldn't do it. I think he wins a very closely contested split decision, 48-47, where it's 2-2 going into the 5th, and everybody is on pins and needles for that. So I'm actually gonna go. The other way, and I'm gonna say that Royval wins. But if a Tatsuro Taira submission happens, I would not be surprised. So I am very much looking forward to this fight, and this is most definitely a MMA's hardcores of hardcores main event, as are the next 2 UFC Apex shows. So if you really like the product that the UFC is putting out. These are the 2 UFC Fight Night cards for you. And
Very much so.
even though we don't have a banner for him, I'm very excited to see how Cody Haddon does in his UFC debut, because I thought his Dana White Contender Series fight was awesome. So it'll be nice to see the next step of the new journey, and that'll be really cool.
Yes, for sure.
So I guess I can review it now. I will be officially in attendance. Yes, I am flying to Las Vegas on Thursday for this event. It is my first UFC Apex event. This is my 12th UFC event all time since I started going to events in 2008. And I understand that the UFC Apex gets a lot of flack, but most of the reviews that I've read from people that have gone to the venue to see a fight, they generally like it because of its intimacy and how quiet the venue can get at times. And I know you're not going to agree with me, but what do you think I should expect from my in-person experience? Because I'm very, very excited to see how this is going to go.
I don't even know what to tell you to expect, man. It's the UFC Apex. I have no clue what it's like in there. I hope for the best for you for sure. I don't know. It's gonna be weird. It's gonna be a lot different than what you're used to.
Yeah, I mean, I just wonder what it's going to be like being one of, potentially between 50 and 100 people in a room
Yeah.
to see 13 fights where we know that that they can go one way or another, or a fight could fall out on the day of the event. It's typically happens on Apex cards, and everybody will be just as surprised for finding out at the same time. So I'm very excited about that. And I'll be at the event on Saturday, and as I can reveal this now too, I will be getting a private tour of UFC headquarters the day before, shortly after the weigh-in. So that'll be very exciting. I'm excited to see how I guess a glimpse of how the well-oiled machine works on a week-to-week basis. I don't exactly know what to expect, considering that they haven't told me what parts of it I'm going to get to see, but hopefully it'll be interesting to a certain extent, because I feel like, besides the videos that come out, a lot of it is kept very, very in-house. So that'll be extremely interesting to think about as well. But again, this Saturday, October 12th, it's going to be an early start time for me. The first prelim is at 1 p.m. Pacific, followed by the main card. You can get the entire card on ESPN Plus. So if you are a diehard who doesn't care about all the massive ranked college football games this weekend, you could tune into a little UFC to hold you over. So, but yeah, that's that's essentially going to do it for this episode. This has been episode 101 of the MMA Outsiders. Thank you again for tuning in. Just wanted to give you a quick reminder that you can listen to the MMA Outsiders wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Premium, and so much more. Again, if you're on the audio-only side, go back over to the YouTube home. Again, that's youtube.com/ETB Network. This was definitely a fun show to do. Do you have any parting words before we get out of here for the evening, as I believe we covered everything we needed to tonight?
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I'm happy to do the show with you as always, and I look forward to maybe doing it with you again soon.
For me, and absolutely anytime. So thank you guys again. We're going to be back next week. We're going to preview UFC Vegas 99. We're going to get into PFL Battle of the Giants from Saudi Arabia and so much more. But until then, for Pat, I'm Zain, and we will see you guys next week. Have a good one.